Day 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. When I think about step 5, for me, it's about clearing away the wreckage of my past. Just the words wreckage of my past indicates things that I've done wrong in my life, things that I may regret, feel guilty about, or shameful for. One of the most significant ones that comes to mind is when I was 17 years old and I had the abortion. That event was so traumatic for me that I really just buried myself in drugs. I really never grieved the loss of a child because I was too busy being high. A lot of other things happened between the ages of 17 and 20. I ran away from my family, like I said. My little sister got married while I was away at college. And I was so busy working and going to school, at least that's the excuse I gave her, that I couldn't come home for her wedding. It was just last year that I finally made amends to her for not coming home to her wedding 30 years ago. At Christmas, when I went to her house, is when I realized I needed to talk about the fact that I had let her down, that I abandoned her. You know, and in all these steps, I've said a few things about people abandoning me. Well, I abandoned my family. I abandoned my relationships with my family, and I abandoned my sister, who I love very much. And she still stood by me when I was going through one of the most traumatic times in sobriety just last year. And I talked to her about the fact that our family was so askew. And, you know, she teared up and said to me, I just made Johnny's family my family. That's her husband. That made me sad because that means I wasn't her family. I didn't care enough to be her family. And I've, you know, lived with a lot of regret over that. And, you know, I've often looked back and thought, how would my life have been different had I had a child? I don't know. I can't speculate that had I gone through with the pregnancy that I would have raised this amazing kid and not become a drug addict. I couldn't even speculate to that. Maybe I would have screwed that kid up the way I always felt like I was screwed up. I do know that everything that has happened in my life has brought me to this point, and I couldn't be the person that I am without some of the struggles and some of the pain. But it took me a long time to start even letting myself off the hook for all of the terrible things I did. I think about also after being molested, and then I started having sex really early. And I think that, you know, that was a way of me punishing myself, because there were many times when I felt like my promiscuity as a young person made me slutty and aided me in putting myself down and not developing into a person who can handle life on life's terms and deal with things in a productive manner. So all of that kind of culminated in a lot of hatred for myself, which we've talked about. And I had to get to some point in step 5 where I could sweep off my side of the street, accept blame for the things that were my fault. Being molested wasn't necessarily my fault, but hanging on to the anger and the rage for so long in my life, that was on me. I could have let some of that go, but I buried it in drugs and alcohol. I just had all this guilt and shame. I've talked a lot about the anger and the rage, but the guilt and shame is really what I could never let go of in my heart. And the guilt and the shame is what drove me to feel so badly about myself. I never wanted to let myself off the hook. I remember in early sobriety, my counselor, every time I'd open my mouth, he'd start doing this. And that was his way of whipping himself over the back and showing me that that's what I did every day, was beat myself over the back. I thought that I deserved literally to be whipped. And so if you weren't going to do it for me, I was going to do it. So that's what this step really is all about for me. It took me a few years to really start to forgive myself for the mistakes I made. And those are only a few of the things that I did wrong in my life. But those were some of the most traumatic ones, you know. And now I'm at a point where I do forgive myself for those, and I do know that had those things not happened in my life, I may not be the person that I am. I know that I'm not the only one that has regret and shame and guilt, but if you have that kind of shame and regret and guilt, you don't have to live with it. It's okay to let yourself off the hook. It's okay to try to live a different way and to be a better person regardless of the mistakes you've made. And, we say in here, don't regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. Without my past, I wouldn't be in this present, and neither would you. And if you want a future, then you have to accept that past and deal with it the same way I have. Join us tomorrow for step 6.